She helped a stranger with his groceries. The next day, he showed up at her work as her new CEO millionaire. Rain slapped against the pavement in thin, cold sheets as Claire pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders. Her blonde hair, hastily tied back, clung to her neck in damp strands. The sky over New York was a heavy gray, and puddles gathered at every curb, reflecting traffic lights like melting jewels. She'd just finished a double shift at the diner. Her feet ached, and her stomach growled with a quiet vengeance. She ducked into the corner grocery store, shoulders hunched, chasing the dry warmth inside. The bell above the door gave a weary chime. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Claire blinked at the brightness, wiping droplets from her cheeks. Her hands fumbled in her coat pocket, pulling out a crumpled $5 bill. Enough for a couple of instant noodle packs, maybe a can of soup if it was on sale. The store was busy. A long line trailed behind the single open register. Claire stepped into it, her body relaxing just slightly as she browsed the clearance shelf near the front. Her fingers curled around a discounted pack of ramen, and she smiled at her tiny victory. Ahead of her in line stood a young man, mid to late 20s, tall but hunched slightly, his white t-shirt stained with fresh splashes of mud. His hair was disheveled and damp, sticking up in places like he had run through a rainstorm and lost. In one hand he held a small basket, milk, a loaf of bread, a couple of apples. Nothing indulgent, just enough to survive. When he reached the register, he patted his pockets, panic flickering in his eyes. "Sir?" the cashier asked, unimpressed. He looked up, swallowing. I had my wallet. I think I dropped it." "No money, no purchase," the cashier said flatly, tapping her nails against the counter. The man blinked at her, speechless. Claire watched, her breath caught somewhere between instinct and hesitation. She saw the frustration in his eyes, not entitled, not angry, just tired, lost. She stepped forward. "Put it on mine," she said, voice steady. She didn't look at the man. She simply reached past him and handed her wrinkled bills to the cashier. The line shifted with murmurs. Someone behind her scoffed, but she didn't turn. "You really don't have to," the man started, his voice low and startled. Claire finally looked up at him. His eyes were a clear, soft green under the fluorescent lights, rimmed with disbelief. "Then don't thank me," she said with a small, tired smile. "Just do the same for someone else someday." The cashier rang up both purchases with a roll of her eyes. Claire took her noodles. The man hesitated, his basket now bagged, still standing there like he might explain something more. He began again, but Claire raised her eyebrows gently and interrupted, not unkindly. "It's just groceries, not a loan. You're good." He looked at her for a long moment. Something about her calm, the quiet exhaustion in her eyes, stopped him from saying what he originally intended. He closed his mouth and simply nodded. As they exited the store together, the city opened back up into the wet, glowing blur of evening. The drizzle had returned, soft and persistent. They stood awkwardly under the awning. Claire tucked her noodles into her canvas tote. The man shifted beside her, juggling the grocery bag. "Can I ask your name?" he said finally. She tilted her head. "Claire." He smiled, a little unsure. "I'm Alex." Their handshake never came. Instead, Claire stepped off the curb into the mist, nodding toward the side street. "I'll walk you to the corner, safer that way." "Thanks," he said, falling in step beside her. Claire didn't ask where he lived. She didn't need to know. And he didn't explain why his shoes were soaked, why his shirt was filthy, or why someone like him looked out of place but not entirely lost. As they reached the intersection, Claire paused. "Do you want help looking for your wallet?" she asked, surprising even herself. Alex hesitated. "I don't want to bother you." She shrugged. "We've already shared groceries, might as well go full stranger adventure." He laughed, light, real. Claire smiled, the edges of her lips finally relaxing. They turned the corner, disappearing into the night. Behind them, the grocery store light flickered once, then went back to buzzing quietly, unaware that something significant had just begun. Under umbrellas, behind a rain-smeared window, where a girl gave more than money and a boy chose silence over identity. Neither of them knew it yet, but this chance encounter under storm clouds was the first line of a story neither one would want to rewrite. The rain had lightened to a cold drizzle, mist curling along the edges of sidewalks. They retraced his steps, the neon buzz of the corner store fading behind them. Claire's boots splashed through shallow puddles, and her breath came out in tiny clouds. The streetlights flickered as the two made their way down narrow alleys and along rows of parked cars. Trash bins lined the curb, their lids rattling slightly in the wind. They passed a diner, its windows fogged and golden. Alex glanced sideways. "You always help strangers?" Claire shrugged. "Only the ones with good intentions and bad luck." He smiled at that. At the next intersection, the light blinked red. Claire looked both ways, but the street seemed quiet. She stepped forward just as a car, tires screeching, came barreling through the yellow light. "McClare?" In a heartbeat, Alex grabbed her wrist and yanked her backward. She stumbled, her feet slipping on the wet curb. She crashed into him, her palms landing against his chest, the bag of groceries hitting the ground beside them. The car roared past with a blast of cold air and a horn. Claire stood frozen for a moment, her heart hammering. She pulled back slightly, breath catching, then placed her hand over her chest and let out a nervous laugh. "Okay, that was close." Alex looked down at her, his hand still gently holding her arms. "You all right?" Claire nodded, cheeks flushed. "Yeah, just a little jumpy now." Their eyes met, and for a moment, time seemed to stall. The sounds of the city blurred into the background. It was just them, standing on the edge of what could have been disaster, but somehow felt like something else entirely. Claire cleared her throat and stepped away, brushing at her jacket. "Thanks for, not letting me die." Alex grinned. "Any time." They walked on in silence until Claire spotted something beneath a park bench. Mud-streaked, barely visible in the dim light. "Hey, is that—" She reached down, wiped away some dirt, and held up a soaked leather wallet. Alex blinked. "That's it." She didn't open it, didn't even glance inside, just handed it over like it was nothing more than a loaf of bread. He stared at her. "You didn't check it?" Claire tilted her head. "Wouldn't be much of a rescue if I did." There was something in her voice, steady, sincere, that hit him deeper than expected. He opened his mouth, then closed it. "You're kind of rare." She shrugged. "I just believe people are more than what's in their pockets." He looked down at the wallet, then back at her, lips curving into a smile. "Let me buy you dinner. Or, well, whatever counts as dinner at a food truck." Claire laughed. "You had me at carbs." They found a truck selling grilled cheese and tomato soup on the next block. The air smelled like melted butter and pepper. They sat on a bench beneath an awning, their paper cups steaming in their hands. "I haven't had grilled cheese in years," Claire said, taking a bite. "This feels like childhood." Alex smiled. "Good childhood?" She nodded. "Mostly. My mom was a seamstress, raised me alone. She made clothes out of nothing, curtains, old sheets, even newspaper once, when I needed a costume for school." "What happened to her?" "She got sick. We didn't have insurance. She passed when I was 17. Alex looked down at his soup, then at her again. "I'm sorry." Claire smiled faintly. "Me too." They sat there for a long while, eating in silence, the soft patter of rain on the metal awning above them. No titles, no expectations, just soup, stories, and the quiet kind of connection that slips in when no one's trying to impress anyone. Alex studied her face when she wasn't looking. There was something in Claire's gaze, resilient, unafraid, real. She didn't ask questions he could not answer, She didn't assume he was anyone special. And for the first time in a very long time, Alex felt like he could breathe. Under the glow of a flickering street lamp, Claire wiped her hands and stood. "Well," she said, "you've officially paid me back." "Not even close," he replied. She smiled, then surprised me, and with that, they started walking. The days turned into a quiet rhythm of shared time. Claire and Alex, two people from opposite ends of the city's spectrum, at least by appearance, fell into a habit of meeting in the evenings after work. Their places of refuge weren't candlelit restaurants or cocktail bars, but benches in Central Park, food trucks near the library, or the stone steps outside the old opera house, where live music sometimes floated out on summer air. They would sit with cheap takeout in paper boxes, laughing between bites. Alex often brought a sketchbook he never used, just to pretend. Claire brought ideas, sketches, old dreams, wild inventions she scribbled on napkins. One night, sitting under a tree lit by a single overhead lamp, Claire handed him a doodle of a bird with a crown. "If I were a bird," she said, "I'd be this one. Lost most days, but still trying to rule her little branch." Alex chuckled. "I like her style." "I don't need much," Claire said, tracing the lines with her fingertip. "Just not to be invisible, you know? Like, I want to walk into a room and have someone know I was there. Not because I'm loud, but because I mattered." Alex looked at her for a long moment. "You matter," he said softly. "You always have." She smiled, eyes dropping to the grass. "Well, not everyone thinks so." He leaned back on his elbows. "My family used to be comfortable," he offered. "Big house, vacations in the south of France. Then things fell apart. Bad investments, lawsuits. We lost it all. That's when I learned who people really are." Claire nodded slowly, her empathy blooming. "Is that why you dressed like a struggling artist with holes in his sneakers?" He grinned. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just bad at laundry." They laughed together, a little longer than necessary, and in that space, something gentle unfolded. Claire believed his story completely. Why wouldn't she? He was open and humble, never boastful, never pushing. She had no idea the shoes he wore were worn because he chose them, not because he had to. And for Alex, it was the first time in years someone liked him without knowing his last name, his balance sheet, or the buildings bearing his company's logo. But not every evening was easy. One night, Claire showed up later than usual. Her shoulders sagged, her hair loose and windblown, her eyes red. Alex sat up from the bench where he had been waiting. "Claire? What happened?" She dropped beside him, her voice trembling. "Work. My manager said I was too slow, too soft. He humiliated me in front of everyone, told me maybe waiting tables isn't for people who doodle dreams on their order pads." Alex's jaw tightened. "He said that?" She nodded, wiping at her cheek. "I almost quit on the spot, but rent's due, and I already have 3 final notices taped to my fridge." He reached into his coat pocket and handed her a napkin, one of the sketching ones, still blank. She took it with a shaking laugh. "You're giving me a canvas?" "I'm giving you a place to breathe," he said gently. She looked up at him, and for the first time that evening their eyes locked. His were steady, calm, the way someone might look at a storm but choose to stay anyway. He reached out, his thumb brushing a tear away from her cheek. "You see light in people," he said, his voice quiet but sure. "Even when they're covered in mud. That's your gift." Claire swallowed hard. "You think that's enough?" "I think it's more than enough," he whispered. They sat like that for a long time, under the city's darkening sky. Claire rested her head on his shoulder, not because it was romantic, but because it was safe. And in that moment, both of them felt like maybe this strange, mismatched friendship was the most real thing they had. Claire lands a new, better job. Her first morning, she sits at her new desk on the 14th floor of Halston Media, a modest but ambitious creative agency in a downtown building. The office buzzed with morning energy, keyboard clicks, the whir of the coffee machine, and the occasional laughter from clustered cubicles. This job, in the creative department, felt like her first real step forward. After years of scraping by, finally she had a chair with her name on it and a window, albeit one facing a brick wall. She threw herself into her work with quiet determination, staying late to sketch pitch ideas and storyboard concepts that no one else had time for. Her favorite was a quirky campaign idea for a new eco-friendly detergent, animated bottles with personalities, cleaning not just clothes but bad moods too. It was weird. It was original. It was her. She shared it at the weekly concept meeting, nervous but hopeful. 2 days later, Sasha, a polished senior associate with killer heels and colder eyes, presented the same idea to the creative director. Word for word, frame for frame. Claire sat frozen in her chair as Sasha breezily walked through the pitch like she had dreamt it up in her sleep. People nodded. The director smiled. Claire's name was never mentioned. After the meeting, Claire followed Sasha into the hallway. "You used my idea," she said quietly, trying not to shake. Sasha turned, all saccharine sweetness. "Oh, honey, you must be mistaken. We must have just had similar thoughts. Happens all the time." "But it was in my email to the team," Claire insisted. Sasha shrugged. "And who's going to believe that? You're new. I've been here 5 years." Claire reported it. HR listened politely but took no action. Later that afternoon, her manager called her in. "We've received concerns about your professionalism," he said flatly. "Until we can investigate, you're being placed on leave." Claire left the office with her badge clipped to a cardboard box of personal items, her hands trembling, her throat tight. The next morning, she arrived at the building anyway. She could not explain why, some stubborn mix of rage, injustice, and disbelief. She stood outside the lobby, unsure what to do next, when someone tapped her shoulder. "Excuse me," a receptionist said. "Are you Claire? You're needed upstairs, right now." Confused, Claire followed her. The elevator ride felt like an eternity. The doors opened on the executive floor, a level she had never seen. A line of employees stood by the glass conference room, watching someone inside. Claire stepped in and stopped breathing. Alex. He stood at the head of the table, wearing a crisp navy suit, hair neatly combed, confidence radiating from him like light off steel. His eyes swept the room and landed on her. "I'm Bent." The man in the rain, in a muddy t-shirt, sharing sandwiches and napkin sketches, now stood as the CEO of Halston Media. He smiled, a flicker of softness breaking through the polished facade. Claire's heart didn't beat. It recoiled. She turned before he could speak, walked out past the stunned employees, past the elevator, and into the stairwell. Alex called after her, but she didn't look back. She made it 3 flights down before stopping, clutching the railing, her breath ragged. He lied. Not just about his past, about everything. And the worst part? She had believed every word. Claire kept her phone on silent. She stopped checking her email. For days she avoided the subway route that passed Halston Media. Her heart sank every time she saw someone in a navy suit. She even changed coffee shops, swapping their usual corner for one with no memories. But Alex did not disappear. He left her voice messages. "Claire, please, just talk to me." He sent handwritten notes tucked inside sketch pads with flowers she never acknowledged. Her heart betrayed her each time she saw his messy handwriting, each time she reread the same words. It was real to me, every moment. Still, she stayed away. One afternoon, Claire sat alone in her tiny room, the window cracked just enough to let in the fading sunlight. She pulled an old shoebox from under her bed, the one that held yellowing photographs and a ribbon that once belonged to her mother. Her fingers brushed a picture, a woman with gentle eyes, sitting behind a sewing machine. Her mother had worked day and night to raise her alone. Her father, wealthy, married and afraid, had walked away when Claire was a toddler. She remembered her mother's tears when his family sent a final check in the mail with a note, "Do not contact us again." She remembered hearing her mother whisper to a neighbor, "They'll never accept someone like me. We come from different worlds." Claire had vowed never to put herself or anyone else through that again. So when Alex stood there in his expensive suit, the CEO of the company that had fired her, he wasn't just a man who had lied. He became the embodiment of everything her mother had once feared. That evening, as rain streaked the windows, someone knocked. She hesitated, then opened the door. There he was, drenched, no umbrella, his dark hair dripping rain down his forehead, shirt soaked through. He didn't care. He just looked at her, quiet, steady. "Why are you here?" Her voice cracked. "I needed to see you. One more time." She stepped back slightly. "You lied to me." "I know," he nodded. "I did not mean to hurt you." Then why pretend? Why the t-shirt, the fake story? Because it was the first time in years that someone didn't see a title or a balance sheet, just me. Claire looked away. The pain in her eyes burned brighter than any accusation. Alex stepped closer, his voice breaking. "I lied about who I was. But not what I felt?" Silence fell between them. And then, through clenched teeth, Claire whispered, "You belonged to a world that always hurt people like me." Rain tapped on the steps. "I know," he said, "and I wish I could rewrite the world for you, for us. But I can't. All I can do is be in it, with you, honestly." She looked up at him, eyes full of tears. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something, small and folded. It was the receipt from the night they met, still crumpled from his wallet, the same night she paid for his groceries. He had kept it. "Do you remember what you said that night?" he asked. She nodded faintly. "I said, do the same for someone else someday." He gave a half smile. "I've been trying to, starting with you." Claire held the receipt in her hand. Something shifted inside her. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a memory of something more fragile than anger. Oh, 2 weeks had passed. Claire thought the silence would help her breathe, but instead it filled her apartment like fog, settling in corners, hanging heavy in the air. She still went to the same coffee shop, still took the long route home, but every time she sat alone, the absence of his voice echoed louder than the city noise. She missed him more than she had expected, more than she had wanted. It was not just the way he looked at her or the way his voice softened when she was tired. It was the way he had made the mundane magical, the way he saw beauty in napkin sketches, in street food, in her quiet resilience. One evening, Claire opened a drawer and found a folded napkin, one they had once doodled on together during a late-night coffee run. A crooked sun, a lopsided pizza, a tiny house drawn with shaky lines. She smiled, then blinked against the sudden sting in her eyes. That night, a knock echoed through her hallway. A package lay at the doorstep, no return address, just her name written in careful block letters. She carried it inside with hesitation, sat on the floor, and opened the lid. Inside was a shoebox-sized treasure trove, dozens of napkins, some yellowed, some wrinkled, all covered in the playful, messy, beautiful sketches they had drawn together. The pizza slice, the tiny house, a cloud with her name in it, a butterfly with his, and at the very bottom, a small, slightly curled photograph. It was them, seated on the curb by a food truck, biting into warm baguettes and laughing mid-bite. Someone must have taken it from a distance, maybe Mia, maybe a stranger, but the joy in their faces was unmistakable, candid, real. Claire held the photo to her chest, breathing in slowly, as though it could somehow steady her heart. There was a note tucked into the corner of the box. written in Alex's hand. It read, "I did not know what I was looking for the day I met you. But you, your heart, your honesty, gave meaning to moments I never thought mattered. You taught me how to stop running from the quiet and start living in it, how to let laughter echo in empty rooms. You reminded me that kindness is not small, that love does not need chandeliers or suits to be real. I am still that guy in the white t-shirt, if you'll believe me. Still the man who wants to share bad coffee and good silence. Still the one who remembers every laugh, every napkin, every look you gave me like it was the first time anyone had truly seen me. If you can forgive the deception, I will spend every day proving that the truth of how I feel was always the most honest thing about me. I miss you, Alex." Claire read the letter twice, then again. Her fingers trembled, but not from fear. Something warmer flickered in her chest. She held the napkins, one by one, reliving every late-night snack, every rainy walk, every joke whispered across sidewalks. She heard his laugh again, saw the way he leaned forward when she spoke, as if her words mattered more than anything else. And she remembered what he said outside her building, in the rain. "I lied about who I was, but not what I felt." That night, Claire did not cry. Instead, she laughed, softly like a secret, and whispered into the stillness, "Maybe I do believe in the guy in the white t-shirt after all." The office lobby looked different now, brighter, sharper, but Claire walked through it with steady steps. Her heels echoed against the polished floor like a quiet drumbeat of resolve. She passed the reception desk, the glass elevators, the art installations meant to impress, but none of it mattered. Inside her, the noise was gone. No more doubt, no more replaying conversations, no more flinching at her own reflection, wondering if she was good enough. Today, she was not here because of Alex. She was here for herself. To reclaim what was hers, to prove something, not to them, not even to him, but to the version of herself who once believed she did not belong in rooms like this. Claire entered the creative department with calm, clipped steps. The room buzzed with idle chatter and keyboard clicks, but it fell quiet as she passed. Sasha sat at her desk, legs crossed confidently, flipping through a magazine like the world belonged to her. When their eyes met, Sasha's expression faltered just for a beat. It was small, but Claire caught it. She walked up without hesitation, set her bag down, opened her laptop, and pulled up the email archive. It was all there, the campaign concept, the annotated sketches, the time-stamped mood board she had agonized over for nights. A complete record. Undeniable. "I think you dropped something," Claire said, voice cool and crisp as she turned her screen toward Sasha. Sasha paled slightly, her fingers tightened around the magazine. No witty comeback, no smug denial, just silence. Within the hour, Sasha was called into HR. Claire didn't stay to gloat. She didn't wait for an apology. She didn't need it, because today she had stood tall, and the truth had spoken louder than the whispers behind her back. Later that afternoon, while sorting campaign notes at her desk, she heard footsteps. A quiet approach. Familiar. "Claire," said a voice, low, respectful, not corporate polished, but real. She looked up. There he was, Alex, in his tailored navy suit, crisp white shirt, and polished shoes, but none of that mattered. What she saw were the eyes, still honest, still holding the same softness she had first noticed outside that rainy supermarket. "I heard," he said. "You did it." Claire gave a small nod. She did not stand. She did not smile. "It had to be me," she replied. "I needed to stand on my own." "I know," Alex said, his voice a little quieter. "That's why I stayed away." She finally looked at him, really looked, and in his gaze there was no demand, no guilt, no grand plea to fix what had been broken, just hope, a quiet, steady hope. The office eventually emptied out. Lights dimmed, keyboards went silent, and still, Claire stayed. As the sun began to set, painting streaks of amber across the floor-to-ceiling windows, she stood and walked to his office. Her fingers curled around the doorframe for a moment. Then she stepped in. Alex turned from the window surprised, but he didn't speak. He just waited. Claire crossed the room slowly, her footsteps softer now, more intentional. She stopped a few feet from him, close enough to feel his presence, close enough that her voice did not have to be loud. "If I step into your world," she said, steady and clear, "it won't be as a shadow behind you. I'll walk beside you. I'll earn my place not just in your company, but in your life." Her voice trembled just at the end, but it didn't break. Silence held them for a moment where everything they had been and everything they could be hovered in the air. Then Alex took one step forward, like approaching something precious. "I never wanted you behind me," he said. "I only ever wanted you with me." They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. Their arms found each other in slow motion, an embrace born not of passion, but of knowing, of finally understanding that what they had survived was not a test, but a refining fire. Outside the office window, the city pulsed on, horns blaring, lights flickering, people moving fast. But inside that room, two people stood still, not because they had reached the end of something, but because they had finally arrived at the beginning. The conference hall buzzed with soft conversation and clinking coffee cups as people filled the rows of seats. The backdrop behind the stage read, "The future of business, kindness, creativity, and connection." Claire stood backstage, hands clasped together, breathing slowly. Her name was next on the speaker list, and the title of her talk was simple: "Kindness Means Business." It had been exactly 1 year since the stormy day at the grocery store. 1 year since a stranger in a muddy white t-shirt had entered her life and flipped her world gently, completely. Now she stood here, not as someone seeking a voice, but as someone trusted to speak. As the host called her name, applause rose politely. Claire stepped out into the light. Her blonde hair was pinned neatly, and she wore a dark blue dress, simple, confident, but around her neck hung a tiny silver pendant in the shape of a paintbrush, a quiet nod to where she had started. She took the podium, smiled once, then spoke. "About a year ago, I helped a stranger buy groceries. I was exhausted, broke, and probably more stubborn than wise. But I saw someone struggling, and I thought, why not help if I can?" Soft laughter rose from the crowd. Ham was a mess, mud on his shirt, confused, quiet. I thought he was having a worse day than I was, and I didn't want to wait for someone else to do the right thing. She paused. I told him not to thank me, that the only thing I hoped for was that someday he'd do the same for someone else. The room was quiet now, listening. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have guessed, is that he wasn't just a stranger. He was the future CEO of the company I'd one day lead a team in. He was someone who had more power than I'd ever imagined. But that day, all I saw was someone human. Claire let the silence settle a moment, then continued, her voice growing softer. "I helped him with groceries, but he helped me rewrite my life. He gave me the space to be heard, to rise when I had fallen. He saw value in me before I saw it in myself." In the second row, Alex sat quietly, dressed in a sleek charcoal suit. His eyes never left her. She turned her gaze briefly in his direction, just for a second, but the connection was unmistakable. "Turns out," she said, smiling, "the heart is the real currency. Kindness isn't charity, it's legacy. It's how we build trust, loyalty, vision. It's how we lead." A standing ovation followed. The applause was loud, but in Claire's ears the only thing that mattered was the quiet pride in Alex's eyes. Later, after the conference ended and guests trickled out, Claire found Alex waiting for her near the glass doors, holding her coat. "You are amazing," he said softly, helping her into it. She looked at him, eyes shining. We were. Outside, the wind had picked up again, but this time it wasn't a storm, just a breeze reminding them that even the most unexpected beginnings, like a rain-soaked white t-shirt in a grocery line, can lead to the most extraordinary stories. And this one they would write together. If this story touched your heart, reminded you that kindness can change lives in the most unexpected ways, or made you believe just a little more in love, purpose, and second chances, then this is just the beginning. At Soul-Stirring Stories, we bring you tales that don't just entertain. They heal, inspire, and remind you of the beauty in everyday moments. Because sometimes, a rainy afternoon and a muddy white t-shirt is all it takes to begin a story that stays with you forever. Don't miss our next soul-stirring journey. Like, share, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more heartfelt tales that will make you believe again, in love, in hope, and in the goodness of people.